ちょうどいいところに来た。お前にちょっと聞きてえことがあるんだが。
What is it?
おせんとかいう女を知ってるか？斎藤はお前の知り合いだって言ってるんだが。
Sen was a girl I had met a short while ago, whom I helped in a surprise encounter. Saito-san would know, since he was present at the time. Since then, I would chat briefly with her or greet her if I bumped into her during our rounds. She was one of the very few female acquaintances I'd met in my time in Kyoto. So I do happen to know Sen. Did something happen with her?
そっか。いや、さっき帰りがけにその女に声をかけられてな。お前に話してえことがあるんだと。
Oh, I know what this is.
とりあえず、お前を一人で外に出すわけにはいかねえから、ちょっとそこで待っててくれ。この大服、脱いでこねえとな。
今夜巡察に出る予定があるから、俺はこれで失礼する。
They nodded at one another and then headed off in different directions. What did Sen want to talk with me about, I wondered. In a few moments, Harada returned and we left the compound and entered Kyo. I turned to see her waving at me from a short distance away. Hi, Sen. Long time no see.
さっき大使さんに偶然会ってね。あなたのことを聞かせてもらったの。どうしてるか気になってたから。
Really? I've been under the impression that she had something to discuss. But from the way she was talking, it sounded as though she only had inquired as to my condition. I looked at Harada, who coughed quietly and looked away. Did our boy just lie for the first time and it was convincing? I think he did.
お前と話してえことがあるって言ってたからな。
His voice was a low mumble. I wasn't sure if Sen had heard him or not.
ねえ、よかったらあそこの茶店でお話ししない？あのお店のお団子、すっごく美味しいの。
It was the tea house we'd visited together before. She was correct about the quality of the odango, but I glanced up at Harada.
せっかくだから二人で話してきたらどうだ？女同士積もる話もあるだろう。俺は離れたところで茶でもすすってるからよ。
Thanks. Then I think I will take you up on your offer, Sen.
さあ、行きましょう。
Sen and I made our way into the tea house as Harada wandered off.
最近どう？男女体に女の子が一人じゃ大変でしょう。困ったことがあったら遠慮しないでいつでも言ってね。
Oh, well, I'd only seen her a handful of times since coming to Kyoto, but she knows that I'm a girl and she treats me like one, so I can't thank Sen enough for that. I really appreciated it. Actually, I wanted to ask you, how did you know I was a girl the first time we met?
それって不思議なところ？見ればわかるに決まってるじゃない。女同士だもの。
Oh, really? Huh. I didn't really get it, but then again, it wasn't like I'd been in a situation where identifying disguised women was required.
それよりいろいろ聞きたいことがあるの。年はいくつだっけ？生まれはどこ？
I think I told you that last time, but as I began to talk, I felt myself begin to open up to her. I told her I was born in Edo and my family name was Yukimura. It was just my father and me, and he ran a Western clinic. We talked about the fashionable kimonos and accessories that were popular in Edo, as well as all the foods and sweets that came from shops. It was so fun to speak with another young girl around my age. Well, nothing really. Nothing really.
あなた方新選組の評判って今日では散々だけど、中にはいい人もいるみたいね。
She nodded pointedly towards Harada, who we could see standing a short distance away. He was leaning against a post, his sharp eyes constantly surveying the area. There was something graceful about his profile. I couldn't look away. Sen leaned over and whispered in my ear.
本当はあなたに会わせてもらえないんじゃないかって思ってたんだけど、あなたと知り合いだって言ったら、あの人がね、こう言ってくれたの。あいつ落ち込んでるみたいだから、少しでも気持ちが明るくなるように楽しい話をしてやってくれって。
本当? Did he really ask her all of that? If so, he was much more perceptive than I'd given him credit for. And the idea that he had done it just for me made me feel warm inside.
どうした？話はもう終わったのか？
He seemed to have noticed we were looking at him. Hi! I scrambled to my feet.
それじゃ、私はこの後用事があるから、もう行くわね。
Thanks for everything.
お礼を言われるようなことなんてしてないわよ。そちらの方もありがとうございました。それじゃ、また。
With a final polite bow to either of us, she turned and walked off with dainty ladylike steps. I still didn't actually know anything about Sun, but talking with her had left me feeling a great deal better.
そんじゃ話も済んだみてえだし、豚書に戻るか。もうすぐ夕飯か。時間が経つのは早えもんだな。多分手が足りてねえと思うから支度を手伝ってやってくれるか。雑用ばっか押し付けちまって悪いが。
He started off towards his room. 待て!
どうかしたのか?
I wanted to tell him, did I really look that unhappy? Thanks for taking me out to talk to Sen today. But did I really look that unhappy?
え?
She told me what you said. That you asked her to cheer me up since I looked down. If I didn't know better, I would have sworn Harada blushed.
なんだ、あの嬢ちゃん喋っちまったのか。本人に知られちゃ台無しじゃねえか。
I'm sorry if I was worrying you. I thought I was hiding it pretty well. I looked down at the floor, embarrassed, but then I felt one of his hands pat the top of my head.
バカだな。隠しきれるはずねえだろ。お前が無理してんのなんて一目見りゃ分かっちまうんだよ。
Is that because I'm still just a kid?
まあ、少なくとも大人じゃねえよな。
Aw. He'd said it as a joke, but it still wasn't the answer I'd hoped for.
なんだよ、落ち込んでんのか？ガキっぽいってのは悪口でもなんでもねえよ。それに 女ってのはお前くらい隙がある方が可愛げがあっていいと思うぜ。
Damn! How did that counter go up? I'm not sure how I feel about that. He let out a laugh.
背伸びしたってしょうがねえだろうが、そういうところがガキだって言うんだよ。
He patted me softly on the head, then stepped into his room and shut the door. Later that night, I sat on the balcony and gazed up at the moon as I replayed the events of the day again in my head. Harada had definitely improved my mood. There was still a great deal for me to worry about, but sulking and self-pity would get me nowhere. It wasn't a sure thing that my father had left for the West, so for now I must keep my head up. I was useless as any kind of soldier, rather than worrying the men, I must learn to listen to them and help them in other ways, just as Harada had done for me. It's chapter 4 time. April 1867. You know what? No, we're skipping because nothing is literally going to change in this goddamn scene. However, even with all of my confusion, I was especially worried about the soldiers. What about the feelings of those who were being left behind? I wanted to know how the people in the Shinsengumi felt about Ito-san and his followers leaving. And then go into a yawn. I decided to ask someone close to the people who were leaving. Perhaps it would be best for me to talk to someone who was close to Heisuke and Sato-san. I'd only known them since I'd come to Kyo, and their departure was making me miserable. The rest of the Shinsengumi had known them for much longer. How were those closest to them feeling? As I was trying to think of who to talk to first, Nagakura and Harada walked out of the common room.
Oh, 昨日は大変だったな。
もう動いても平気なのか。
I'm alright.
怪我の様子はどうなんだ。結構深い傷だっただろう。
Well, it wasn't as deep as it originally seemed. I'm sure it'll heal soon.
そっか。そりゃあよかった。女の肌に傷が残っちまったとなりゃ詫びようがねえからな。
The genuine concern on their faces warmed my heart. They were good men. All of the captains were good men, which only made it that much more heartbreaking that some of them were leaving us.
しかしほんと、ゆうべはひでえ夜だったな。伊藤さんにゃとうとう羅刹のことを知られちまうし。
About Ito-san.
Hmm?
How do you guys feel about Heisuke and Sato-san? About them leaving, I mean.
ああ、そのことか。平助のやつがあそこまで白状者だとは思わなかったな。あいつ、俺たちに一言もなかったんだぜ。ぶっ殺すぞ、ったくよ。
まあ、あいつもあいつで悩んでたんだろう。
Harada's right, he's not. We've seen his reasoning and it's sound for him, I suppose.
悩んだ挙句に出した結論があれかよ。今まであんだけ面倒見てやったのに。
ただこねたってしょうがねえだろうが。同僚の小さいやつだな。
Oh lord, what is going on? Hold up.
ところでよ、近頃の近藤さんのことどう思う？
Kondo-san? What do you mean? Kondo-san didn't seem any different to me than he had the first day I'd met him.
最近の近藤さんちょっと気取ってねえか。幕府のお偉いさんとちょくちょく会うようになったせいかわからねえけどよ。伊藤派のことだってあの人が伊藤さん伊藤さんって甘やかしたからつきやがったと思うんだよな。
Do you disagree with the chief and the commander?
いや、そうじゃねえんだけどよ。まあ、あの嫌味な伊藤が出ていくのはせいせいしてるんだぜ。
しかしいずれ敵対することにはなるだろうな、伊藤さんのとことは。
Harada's words struck me like an unpleasant. Wait, Harada's words struck me as unpleasant president, although I didn't know why. Crossing swords, but why?
伊藤さんたちが今後どこの後ろ盾を得て動くつもりなのかはわからねえが、尊攘派とつながりを持ちてえんなら元新選組なんて肩書きは邪魔にしかならねえからな。
What will you do if we have to fight them?
決まってんだろ。敵に回るようなら切る。
それが新選組だ
って言うだろうな、土方さんならよ。
Nokura scratched his head out of frustration.
けどな、いざあいつらと戦うことになったらどうなるんだろうな。
不定老子を切るのとは話が違うしな。本気でやり合えるかどうかはわからねえ。
Their voices have faded to little more than a murmur. I couldn't ask anymore. My wound healed completely soon afterwards, but I kept the bandages on. I didn't want anyone to see that my scar had healed. Susito-san, Heisuke, and Saito-san all left. The compounds felt so much larger and emptier. Around the same time, Takeda, one of the captains of the Shinsengumi, had also left. I guess these are things we can't help, but I felt as if everyone was going in different directions, off to forge their own paths. I couldn't help but feel sad about it. We're skipping this. We're skipping this whole thing. This one is too long and I don't see benefit to it. What should I do? The answer that we're looking for is yes. I nodded and did my best to look confident. She seemed a little surprised, but she eventually looked relieved and softened up.
そっか。それが誰なのかまでは聞かないけど。
She says she won't ask, but she really deep down wants to ask. I know Sen. She wants to be a nosy bitch, but she can't.
あなたが一人の女の子として見つけたものがここにはあるのね。それなら離れろなんて言えるはずないか。
Thank you for waiting.
どうだった？結論は出たかな？
Before I could speak, Sen stepped forward.
はい。彼女のことをこれまで通りよろしくお願いします。
Sen.
姫様、よろしいのですか？本当に。
ええ、もう決めたことだから。今は彼女の意思を優先しましょう。
分かった。そういうことなら今後も我々新選組が責任を持って彼女の身を預からせてもらおうじゃないか。
まあ大船に乗ったつもりで任せとけって。
新八の船は泥船だけどな。しかしまあよかったな。
ここに残るなんて 君も物好きだね。肝が据わってるのか、単に鈍感なだけなのか。
Fuck you, Okita.
言っておくが、客人扱いする気はねえからな。お前の待遇は今までと同じだ。
Thank you, all of you, for letting me stay. Sen took my hands in hers and let her eyes rest on mine.
くれぐれも気をつけてね。私はいつでもあなたの味方だから。
Thank you, Sen. She gave me one last warm smile, and then Sen and Kimigiku were gone.